Warning: gay hate crime is discussed. Tate kept his movements calm and deliberate. I didn't need to yell, I didn't need to touch them. One glare was enough. Back off, I said, voice low but steady. Now. The three boys froze, looking between Noah and me. The tension in the air was thick. Then slowly, almost reluctantly, they shuffled away. I stayed close to Noah until the last of them turned a corner. You okay? I asked Noah, crouching slightly so my eyes were level with his. Why, yeah, he whispered. He was trembling a little, but he leaned into me anyway. Thanks. Even with me there, he had to endure whispers and side comments throughout the day. Some of the kids, bolder or crueler than the rest, approached him between classes. Everyone thinks you're weird, one girl said, voice loud enough to carry down the hall. You're always holding his hand. Are you, like, in love or something? No, Noah said quickly, trying to shrink back. Yes, you are, she pressed. Tell me the truth. No, I'm not, he shouted, eyes wide. Stop. I arrived just then, placing a hand on his shoulder, guiding him down the hall. Let it go, I said quietly. They're idiots, don't answer them. The girl pouted, muttering, everyone knows, but she let him walk away. The teachers watched from a distance, shifting awkwardly on their feet. They never approached, never intervened. Their discomfort was palpable. This isn't right, Mrs. Henderson whispered to Mr. Clark when she thought I couldn't hear. They're too close, it's not normal behavior. They encourage each other in ways we can't condone. They're just kids, he said, though his voice had an edge of unease. But yes, it makes me uncomfortable. It's not something I know how to address properly. I kept Noah close, whispering to him as we walked the halls, reminding him he was safe no matter what anyone else thought. Ignore them, I told him. All of it, just focus on me. They don't get it. They'll never get it. None of it matters but you and me. He nodded, pressing against my side. I'm glad you're here, he whispered. I'll always be here, I replied. They can say whatever they want, they can watch, they can judge. It doesn't matter. None of it changes anything. Even after school, when the whispers followed us home and the stares lingered in the grocery store or library, I stayed beside him. People could gossip, adults could be uncomfortable, kids could be cruel, but Noah knew he wasn't alone, and that was all that mattered. Fall of 1980, I was 12 and I already hated the way adults hovered around Noah. It was like they thought that I being near him was unnatural, or worse, I knew they didn't understand him, they never would. That morning, at lunch, Noah and I had been wrestling behind the school in our sports uniforms. Just harmless play, like always. He laughed, I giggled, and for a moment the world was right. Then Mr. Reynolds appeared, his face was red, hands were on his hips. Tate Blue, he barked. What the hell do you think you're doing? I froze. We were just. Don't lie to me, he shouted. This is unacceptable behavior, public indecency, encouraging improper conduct. What do you call this? Noah's head dropped, he looked smaller than ever. I'm sorry, sir, he whispered. You're always sorry, aren't you, Noah? Mr. Reynolds sneered. Clingy little freak, always wrapped around this boy, always trying to make everyone else uncomfortable. And you, he jabbed a finger at me, letting him, encouraging him. You're a terrible influence, absolutely shameful. I grit my teeth. He did nothing wrong, he's my buddy. We weren't. Buddy, Mr. Reynolds barked, eyes narrowing. There's nothing friendly about this. You're too close, too familiar, and everyone knows it. You think you're clever, keeping your little secret? I see you, the way you touch him, the way you hold him, completely inappropriate for 12-year-olds, completely unacceptable. I could feel Noah trembling beside me, while the teachers became loud like this. You are forbidden to be near him, Mr. Reynolds continued, voice rising. No more holding hands, no more sitting together, no more wrestling behind the school. Do you understand me, Tate? Yes, I said through gritted teeth. Good, because if I see either of you behaving this way again, either of you, I will involve your parents and the authorities, understood? I hated authority figures who bullied or made Noah cry. All of the teachers in this school were bastards who blamed Noah for everything wrong with us. 1 week later, Mr. Reynolds caught us touching each other's shoulders during study period. I was trying to get Noah's attention during class. My pencil broke, and I needed a new one to fix my mistakes on a homework assignment. Yes, sir, Noah whispered, voice shaking. He pressed against my side, small and fragile. Now into the principal's office, Mr. Reynolds snapped. Both of you, and bring your parents, I want this settled properly. The walk to the principal's office felt longer than a mile. Noah stayed close but silent. I held his hand anyway, though I knew the teachers would notice and frown. I didn't care. I would protect him no matter what they said. Once inside, Principal Dawkins' office was cold and sterile. He gestured for us to sit. "Mr. Blue," Mr. Dawkins said to Terence, voice smooth but with an edge of judgment. "Mr. Reynolds tells me you've been, physically encouraging Mr. Lunas's inappropriate behavior. Is this true?" "I needed a new pencil," I said. "We weren't, he wasn't, he's just my buddy." "Buddy?" Dawkins echoed, tone dripping with disbelief. "You two have been seen holding hands, sitting too close and touching in ways that are, frankly, disturbing. Children notice, teachers notice, parents notice. This cannot continue." Noah's eyes were wide, almost glassy. I reached over and gently squeezed his hand. "It is entirely your responsibility to stop encouraging him," Dawkins said, fixing me with a stare. "You are older, Tate, you are bigger, you have the power here, and you are using it to, what, lead Noah astray, encouraging inappropriate behavior. This is unacceptable." I felt my chest tighten. He's not leading me anywhere, he's just scared, that's all. "You're just enabling him," Dawkins cut me off. "And he in turn makes you look like a unnatural influence on him. This is not just a school problem, this is a moral problem. Both of you are acting in ways that are indecent, and it stops now." Noah leaned into me quiet. I didn't mean, I'm sorry," he whispered, almost too soft to hear. "You hear that?" Dawkins said, voice sharp. "He knows it's wrong, and so do you. I will be contacting both sets of parents immediately. You, Mr. Tate, are to keep your distance from Noah Lunas at all times during school hours. No touching, no sitting together, no conversations beyond what is necessary for class. Understood?" "I wrestle at home with Noah every day. There's nothing weird about what we do." "Yes," I said, voice low but tense. "Yes, sir," Noah whispered, trembling. And that was it? Another day of being blamed for nothing. Another day where Noah was forced to bear the weight of every accusation, and I had to swallow my anger, my frustration, my loyalty to him. I couldn't touch him, couldn't hold him, couldn't comfort him in front of them. As soon as we were out of their sight, I took his hand again, whispered, "Ignore them. They don't understand. I'll protect you, always." He pressed close, relieved. That was enough for both of us. For them, maybe we were scandalous. For me, he was everything worth protecting, even if the world hated him for it. Noah tried to keep to himself, but the older kids were relentless. At lunch, 3 boys blocked him as he carried his tray. "Hey, Lunas," the tallest sneered. "Sitting over there all alone, huh? Afraid someone's going to see how you act with Blue." "I'm fine," he muttered, eyes darting around. "Fine, don't lie, everyone knows you like him, admit it," another boy pressed. I don't," Noah whispered, voice trembling. "You do, tell us the truth." I strode up, hands in my pockets, voice low but deadly. "Back off." They froze, unsure. One glare from me, and the tallest muttered, "Whatever," before shuffling away. Noah leaned into me, trembling. "Thanks," he whispered. Even after that, the whispers followed us. Teachers didn't intervene, they just stared awkwardly, shifting on their feet, uneasy. Mrs. Henderson muttered to Mr. Clark once as I walked past, "I don't know. It just feels wrong. They encourage each other in ways we can't condone." "They're just kids," he said, though he didn't sound convinced. "But yes, it makes me uncomfortable. It's not something I know how to handle." One day, as we walked down the hallway, a girl cornered Noah. "Everyone says you're weird," she hissed. "Holding hands all the time. Do you like him or not?" "No, I don't," Noah shouted, trying to step back. "Yes, you do," she pressed. "Tell me the truth." I stepped forward, gently but firmly, guiding him down the hall. "Ignore them," I whispered. "They're idiots, don't answer." The girl huffed but let us go. "Everyone knows anyway," she muttered. By the end of the week, the harassment had escalated. During class, kids flicked pencils, passed notes, and whispered in ways meant to humiliate Noah. Mr. Reynolds made comments under his breath, loud enough for me to hear. "See how he clings, pathetic. Completely unnatural. This one's going to need serious guidance." One day, Principal Dawkins called both of us in. The office was cold, sterile, smelling faintly of disinfectant. Mr. Blue, Dawkins said, voice smooth but judgmental. Mr. Reynolds tells me you've been encouraging Mr. Loonis in inappropriate behavior, holding hands, sitting too close. This cannot continue. It's just play, I said. He's my buddy, that's all. There's nothing friendly about this, Dawkins said. Children notice, teachers notice, parents notice. This is a moral problem. Both of you are acting indecently and it stops now. Noah pressed close, trembling. I didn't mean to. You hear that? Dawkins said, eyes narrowing on me. He knows he is wrong, and you, Mr. Blue, you must keep your distance. No touching, no sitting together, nothing beyond what is necessary for class, understood? Yes, sir, I said, jaw tight. What's the big deal? Are you afraid I'm going to fondle Noah or kiss him? I smiled. Noah blushed. Mr. Blue, please, the principal hissed. Homosexuality is a disgrace and you talking about it in school is inappropriate. I don't desire to do those things with Noah. Noah whispered, almost inaudible, hilarious. Even our parents were called in. My mom frowned, arms crossed, while my dad shifted uncomfortably. Noah's mom sat stiffly, glancing between the principal and her son. Mrs. Blue, Mr. Blue, Dawkins said, we are concerned about these children's interactions. This is not normal behavior. We advise close monitoring and strict limits on contact during school hours. It's just closeness, I muttered, but the words hung useless in the sterile office. Noah's mom finally said, voice quiet and defensive, he's a shy boy. He needs a friend. He's harmless. I don't see the problem. The principal shook his head. Harmless, that's not the point. The influence is inappropriate. The behavior, unnatural. Children of this age should not be so attached in ways that disturb their peers. I kept my hand on Noah's, low and tight. He leaned against me, trying to shrink into me. After the meeting, the harassment didn't stop. Lunchroom whispers, hallway stares, the occasional shove or elbow. I stayed near him, glare ready for anyone who stepped too close. One afternoon, 2 boys cornered him in the bathroom. You like him, don't you? One said, don't try to lie. I don't, Noah stammered. Come on, the other boy pressed, smirking. Everyone knows, just say it. I appeared from around the corner, voice low, steady. Leave him alone, now. They froze. I didn't move. I just stood there, watching. Slowly, they backed away. I stayed close to Noah until we were both safe from their prying eyes. In January 1981, the harassment had escalated to the point where the police were called. I hated it before it even started, but I knew I had to be there for Noah. They split us into different rooms, officers staring at him like he was some piece of trash stuck to their shoe. I was first. The officer's desk was cold and intimidating, fluorescent lights humming above. Mr. Blue, the officer began, voice flat, we've been told you've been engaging in inappropriate behavior with Noah Loonis. Holding hands, sitting too close, touching. Is that correct? It's just companionship, I said, jaw tight. That's all, he's my buddy, nothing else. The officer scoffed. Buddies, don't play games with us, the school is concerned. You're 12 years old, you know this is considered indecency and homosexual behavior is not tolerated. I didn't do anything wrong, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. He's just a kid. Noah is a sensitive, introverted child. I'm his protector against bullies. They didn't believe me, they didn't understand, they didn't need to. Meanwhile, across the hall, Noah was in a room with another officer. I could hear muffled sobs when I strained my ears. When I peeked through the small window, I saw the officer leaning over Noah, speaking in a harsh tone. You understand what indecency is, don't you, Loonis? The officer said. Do you know what happens to boys who engage in this kind of behavior? Noah's small shoulders shook. I don't, I'm sorry. They get AIDS and die, you're sorry, the officer barked. Do you know you're acting unnatural? This is serious. The law doesn't look kindly on this. Do you understand me? Yes, sir. Noah's voice was barely audible, cracked and trembling. Do you even know what homosexuality is? The officer pressed. I don't, Noah whispered. The officer shook his head and muttered something under his breath that I couldn't ignore. Boy, liking each other, it's unnatural and disgusting. Noah began crying harder, little sobs shaking his body. I felt my chest tighten in pain for him, wishing I could break down the door and shield him from the world. They tried to interrogate him further, but eventually the officer gave up, muttering the gay F slur one last time in frustration before walking out. When I came out, Noah was leaning against the wall, shoulders trembling, tears streaking down his face. I pulled him into my arms immediately. "It's okay," I whispered, rubbing his back. "It's okay, they don't understand, they never will." They said I'm disgusting," he sobbed, burying his face into my chest. "No," I said firmly, "you're not, you're perfect, you're mine, and I'll always protect you no matter what they say." They said I'm unnatural," he hiccuped. I tightened my hold. "They're wrong, every word, don't let them touch you, not here, not anywhere, I've got you always." On the bus home, it was the same. Noah curled into my side, crying quietly as the cold hum of the engine filled the space around us. Kids gave us sidelong glances, whispers following us, but I didn't care. I held him tighter, pressing my hand along his back. SHH, I murmured. "Ignore them, they're idiots, you're fine, Noah, you're perfect, don't you ever forget that." He sniffled, finally looking up at me with big, red-rimmed eyes. "Promise." "Promise," I said, and I meant it. Noah would cry into my shoulder after every meeting with teachers, staff, or the cops. Each time I held him. Every time I whispered that the world didn't matter, only him and me. It became a ritual, our defense against a world that seemed determined to hate, shame, and to make him feel small. And in those moments, I realized something. No matter what the world called him, what they said, no matter how much it hurt him, I would always be the one who protected him, who loved him, who made him feel safe. Because to me, Noah Lunas wasn't disgusting or gay, but a straight, shy geek who was my everything. The worst incident happened in high school when we were 14. Noah had gone to the men's room alone, probably just trying to get away from the teasing at lunch. But three athletic kids, jocks who were loud and cruel, decided to corner him. I don't even know what they thought they were going to accomplish, except maybe scare him into some kind of false confession. They blocked the exit, laughing. "Hey Lunas," the tallest sneered. "Heard everyone says you like Tate Blue, time to correct that, you like sodomy, fag, how would you like to experience your fantasies?" "Noah's not gay," I muttered under my breath as I ran up the hall, spotting him in trouble. "I'm not," Noah whimpered while shielding his head with his hands. "Yeah, you are," another one barked, shoving him against the wall. "We're just going to teach you a lesson, straighten you out ASAP." The lead jock held a mop in his right hand and signaled for his two goons to hold Noah down while he unbuckled Lunas's pants. Noah's eyes went wide. "Tate, help me," he whispered, trembling. I would never allow anyone to treat Noah the way my family had treated me. Those jocks thought it was acceptable to gang rape Noah, using a mop to sexually assault him because he acted gay or didn't demonstrate toxic masculinity for the school. I didn't even hesitate. I ran straight into them, my fist swinging. I kicked the first one square in the balls. He doubled over, gasping. The second one tried to grab me, and I planted a foot right into his stomach, sending him staggering. The third lunged, and I didn't hold back, a kick straight to the groin. They went down like sacks of garbage. Noah collapsed against the wall, shaking and crying, burying his face in his hands. I grabbed him gently. "It's okay, Noah, it's over, I've got you." But when we reported the incident to the principal, it was worse than I expected. Mr. Dawkins leaned back in his chair, hands steepled. "Mr. Blue," he said slowly, voice cold, "you should be careful with your impulses. Violence isn't the answer, no matter how tempting it might feel. You could have escalated the situation." I glared at him. They were hurting him. He couldn't defend himself. "And yet, Mr. Lunas," Dawkins said, glancing at Noah, "some might say Noah deserved the lesson. Not every boy is lucky enough to have jocks intervene for them by correcting their gay behavior. Maybe this will fix him." Noah's shoulders shook violently. I didn't," he stammered, tears streaking his face. "Sit down," Dawkins said, "both of you, and try to behave. Schools have rules and rumors. Well, we don't control what other kids say." I wanted to scream. Noah wasn't gay, I wasn't gay, and yet nobody cared about the truth. The gossip, the assumptions, the rumors, they were all that mattered. If anyone could twist the situation to make it uglier, they would. I reached over and held Noah's hand. "Ignore them," I whispered. "They don't know anything, they never will, I've got you." He leaned into me, face pressed against my chest, crying quietly. The way the principal had judged him, like he was broken, shame burned in my chest. I didn't care about the rules. I didn't care about the adults' opinions. The only thing that mattered was Noah, trembling, afraid, and in need of protection. We left the office together, silent except for his quiet sniffles. In the hallway, kids whispered and stared, snickering at our side-by-side walk. I ignored them, walking with my hand firmly around his wrist, keeping him close. The rumors and the gossip would never touch him while I was there. Noah wasn't lucky, not according to the principal, but I knew better. He didn't need luck. He had me, and that was all he'd ever need. After that men's room incident, Noah and I became even closer, but we learned quickly that the world didn't care about the truth. They didn't care that neither of us was gay, wanted anything more than to be together, safe and unbothered. What mattered was appearance, gossip, and the judgmental assumptions of kids and adults alike. We adjusted. Public displays of affection, holding hands, leaning on each other, even the small touches I craved were limited at school. I kept my hands near him, my arm brushing his when we walked the hallways, but subtle enough that no one could call us out. That way, the bullies and the faculty had less ammunition, and Noah could breathe without the constant fear of being cornered or mocked. I created buzzwords so we wouldn't use emotional endearments around other people. Still, it angered them. "Look at them," one kid muttered, whispering behind a textbook during class. "They think they can hide it, pathetic." "I swear Noah is manipulating him," another sneered. "Everyone knows Lunas is obsessed." I ignored them, keeping my gaze on the teacher as we sat in our seats, but my arm brushed Noah's back, fingers just lightly resting on his shoulder. He stiffened for a moment, then relaxed. I knew he felt it, even the tiniest reassurance mattered. Teachers, too, were irritable. Mrs. Henderson's eyes followed us from the corner of the room, her voice tight when she spoke to the class. "Boys, I expect proper behavior," she said. "That means sitting appropriately and maintaining boundaries." "Boundaries?" I muttered under my breath. Noah glanced at me, eyes wide but grateful. He knew I understood. The truth was, no one dared try anything while I was around. Bullies lingered in the hallways, waiting for moments I wasn't there, but my presence was enough to keep them at bay. If someone stepped too close, I didn't even have to raise my voice. My stare, cold and sharp, was enough. Most of the older kids knew by now that targeting Noah while I was near was a very bad idea. At lunch, I kept an eye on him from across the room. He carried his tray, scanning for open seats, and I felt the familiar protective surge in my chest. One boy tried to block his path. I strode forward, voice low and controlled. "Move," I said. The kid blinked, taken aback, then muttered whatever and stepped aside. Noah gave me a tiny, relieved smile before slipping past. Even the teachers noticed our closeness. They whispered, judged, stared, but they didn't understand. They never would. They couldn't see that this wasn't love in the romantic sense or even friendship in the conventional sense. It was something sharper, deeper, and far more consuming. It was devotion, worship, a protective bond that made the world shrink when we were together. After class, I caught up with him in the hallway. "You okay?" I asked. Noah nodded, brushing a strand of hair from his forehead. "Yeah, you kept them away." "Always," I said. "I'll always keep you safe." His shoulders relaxed slightly, leaning into me just for a second, enough to remind me why all this teachers judging, kids sneering was worth it. The bond we'd forged at 4 really deepened in middle school, hardened by harassment, rumors, and the stupidity of adults. It was unbreakable. And no one, no matter how loud or cruel, could touch it while I was there. By freshman year of high school, the balance of our lives had become crystal clear. At night, Noah gave me the quiet, warmth, and closeness I craved, and in exchange I protected him, his body, mind, and fragile world at school. It was a silent arrangement neither of us spoke about, but it governed every step we took together. Lunch that day was chaos as usual. Kids whispered, shoved, and jockeyed for position in the seats. I carried Noah's tray carefully, scanning the crowded cafeteria. I walked behind him, eyes alert. "Watch it," I muttered under my breath as one of the popular girls, Stacy, bumped into him intentionally. Noah stumbled slightly, but she laughed, loud and cruel. "Ha, clumsy little freak," she sneered. I didn't even think. I strode over and slammed my hand on the table. "What did you just call him?" I demanded. Stacy's smile faltered. I just said he's clumsy." "Back off," I shot back, voice low and sharp. "Try that again and see what happens." The cafeteria went silent. Kids froze mid-bite, staring at us. Noah pressed his tray against his chest, wide-eyed. "You're lucky I don't hit you," I added. "Go sit with your friends or they'll watch you get embarrassed." Stacy shrank back, muttering insults under her breath as she walked away, her clique trailing in shocked silence. Noah let out a quiet breath and looked up at me. Thanks, he whispered. Don't thank me, I said, keeping my voice low so no one would misunderstand. Just eat, I've got you. The next moment, a nerdy kid named Derek tried to pull Noah's chair out from under him. I stepped in instantly, my foot connecting with the chair so it tipped backward. Derek landed on the floor with a thud, scrambling to get up. The chair is taken, I said, grabbing Noah's arm to steady him. Get lost, loser. Derek's face turned red. Hey, you can't just. Yeah, I can, I interrupted, voice sharp enough to silence him. This is Noah's spot. You try it again, you'll find yourself flat on your face for real again. Noah stared at me, eyes wide but calm, like he already trusted that I would handle it. Thanks, Tate, he said quietly, sliding into his seat. Don't even, I whispered, brushing his shoulder lightly, just eat. Throughout lunch, I kept an eye on him, every whisper, every sideways glance, every smirk. A few kids tried to sneak jabs, calling him names under their breath, flicking paper, but a glare from me was enough to send them scurrying. Even when teachers were around, they seemed uncomfortable with how I moved with him, how I kept him safe, how I wouldn't let anyone touch him. It wasn't love in the way people thought. It wasn't romantic. It was protection, devotion, and worship. I couldn't explain it to anyone, least of all Noah, but every insult, shove, and small victory I carved out for him strengthened that bond. At the end of lunch, Noah whispered, "You always make it stop." I know, I said, voice low, leaning so only he could hear. I'll always make it stop, nobody's touching you, ever. And I meant it, because he was mine to protect, in school and beyond, in the same way he was mine at night, keeping me warm, keeping me grounded. I was offered a lead position on the football team that year. Coach seemed impressed and said I had the size and speed. And my natural instincts were impressive, but my mind wasn't on touchdowns or varsity glory. Noah hadn't been offered anything. Too small, too skinny, and not the type to draw attention for anything athletic. The thought of him standing alone in the cafeteria, the whispers and glances aimed at him, made me decide in an instant. I opted out of football. Instead, I helped Noah study. We sat in the library after school, textbooks spread across the table. Noah's pencil scratched across paper as he solved equations, outlined diagrams, or shaded tiny sketches in his notebook. He had a knack for science, art, and mathematics that made my own brain feel lazy. I watched him work, letting the other kids drift by unnoticed. You sure you don't want to try out for football? Coach had asked that morning. I've got other plans, I said, shrugging, plans with Noah. The coach wasn't pleased with my decision, but who cares what he thinks? You should try out for sports, I said to Noah later that day. Noah looked up, eyes bright with gratitude. Thanks, I'm not athletic like you. I mean it, Noah. It was a good system. No jocks in my face, no cheering crowds, no shallow girls trying to flirt their way into my attention. Well, almost no girls. Hey, Tate, one of the prettiest girls in our grade, Melissa, leaned over my shoulder, hair brushing my arm. I was wondering if you wanted to go to the dance with me on Friday. I glanced down at Noah, whose head was buried in a calculus problem. His pencil paused midline, but he didn't look up. I stammered, feeling her expectant gaze. I can't, got plans with Noah. Melissa blinked. Wait, you're studying with him. Yeah, can't be in two places at once, I said lightly, shrugging. Homework's important, right? Her smile faltered and she gave a tiny laugh. Well, okay, I guess you're dedicated, I'll give you that. Noah glanced up at me then, a tiny smirk tugging at his lips. You didn't even consider saying yes. Not a chance, I muttered, you come first. Melissa walked away, muttering under her breath to a friend. I didn't care. My priority wasn't football, dances, or anyone else. My priority was Noah, his safety, his peace of mind, his quiet little victories, and nothing else in the world mattered, even if the world couldn't understand it. Tate sat alone, staring at the wall like it might eventually give him a clearer answer than his own thoughts. He wasn't someone who spent much time dissecting his opinions. Most of them had formed the way Weather does, slow, unexamined, and inherited from voices he grew up around. About certain things, especially people, he had picked up judgments he never really bothered to question. They were just there, sitting in the background of his mind like old furniture he never rearranged. When Tate thought about homosexuality, his reaction wasn't complicated in his head. It was blunt, unfiltered, and uncomfortable. Tate didn't try to justify it, and he didn't try to build an argument around it. It was more like a reflex of disapproval shaped by things he'd seen, things he'd heard, things he didn't bother to separate into truth and assumption. He never sat down to understand why he felt that way. He just accepted that he did, even if he couldn't fully explain it to himself in any meaningful way. But then his thoughts shifted, as they always did, toward Noah. Noah wasn't an abstract idea. He wasn't a category or a belief system or something Tate could flatten into an opinion. Noah was real in a way that made everything else feel distant and less certain. The rumors had been floating around for a while now, half jokes from people who like stirring things, and whispers passed along without care for accuracy. Tate had heard them more than once, always accompanied by that casual tone people used when they didn't think the subject mattered. Tate didn't like the way it made him feel, not because he agreed with the rumors, but because he hated the way other people handled Noah, like he was a topic instead of a person, like they had any right to define him at all. Tate exhaled slowly, rubbing a hand over his jaw. "They don't know anything," he muttered under his breath, almost irritated at the world in general. In his mind, Noah wasn't something to be speculated about. He was just Noah. The idea that people could reduce him to gossip made something tight settle in Tate's chest, though he wouldn't have called it concern out loud. Then came the thought he always circled back to without meaning to. If Noah were gay, the idea didn't land in his mind with agreement or rejection. It landed as a question that didn't need permission to exist. Tate frowned slightly, like he was annoyed at the thought itself for being so persistent. He tried to imagine it the way other people might believe it would change something fundamental about their relationship, but he couldn't make it fit that way, not in any lasting sense. "No," he said quietly to himself, almost as if responding to a conversation no one else could hear. Then, after a pause, softer and more certain, "It wouldn't matter." The words didn't come from careful reasoning. They came from something simpler, something less shaped by opinion and more shaped by attachment. Whatever boundaries he had built around the world in his head didn't seem to apply cleanly when it came to Noah. It was as if Noah existed slightly outside of those rules, outside of the categories Tate used to sort people into acceptable or unacceptable boxes. He leaned forward, elbows resting on his knees, staring down at the floor now. "I won't lose Noe," he said, quieter this time, like he was admitting something he didn't want to test against logic. "Not for being gay." Tate refused to treat the blonde, sweet boy he had befriended, his savior and protector, like he treated gay people. It wasn't framed as a debate or an exception in his mind. It wasn't a conscious moral shift or some grand realization. It was simpler and more immediate than that. The thought of not having Noah in his life didn't connect to any belief system. It connected to absence, to emptiness, and to something he couldn't tolerate. Tate swallowed, eyes fixed on nothing. The contradictions in him stayed unexamined. The opinions he carried about the world sat in one place unchallenged, but when it came to Noah, those same opinions didn't hold weight. They didn't get to decide anything, not here, not with him. "If that's what he is," Tate murmured after a moment, almost like he was testing the idea rather than accepting it, "then he's still my Noe regardless of his orientation or whatever lies the town told about him." Tate would overlook any queer truth in Noah. Tate would choose to forget or never dwell on any homosexual traits Noah might have. Tate didn't want Noah to be gay, so he ardently believed Noah's straightness and confirmation. Tate hated gay people and beat up queers he found at school or in town, but he'd never lay a hand on Noah unless it was a chaste kiss or intimate hug. And in his mind, that was the only part that actually mattered. Tate stayed where he was, the silence around him feeling heavier the longer he let the thought sit unspoken. It wasn't something he had ever tried to turn into a philosophy or a rulebook. His opinions were usually blunt, unpolished things he carried without examining too closely, and this was no different. About homosexuality, his mind still defaulted to discomfort he couldn't fully explain, a reaction built from fragments of upbringing, conversations overheard, and assumptions he had never bothered to dismantle. But when Noah came into focus, everything in him complicated at once. He stared down at his hands, brow drawn tight, as if trying to organize thoughts that refused to line up properly. "Even if that's true," he murmured to himself, voice low and uneven, "it doesn't change anything between us. Noe is a gift from Jay, the blonde is the boy I love, his straight or gay nature is irrelevant to our relationship." The debt Tate owed Noah for all the things the blonde had given him nullified any flaws Noah may seem to have. Luckily, for Tate, Noah was straight, and he didn't have to worry that his buddy would turn into the very thing he feared most, a gay perv. The words felt more certain than anything he'd said in his head before, and that unsettled him more than the idea itself. Because the truth he couldn't avoid was simple: whatever beliefs he had about gay people in general didn't translate cleanly when it came to Noah. They broke apart the moment Noah was the subject. Tate tried to imagine it in abstract terms, Noah liking boys, being queer, fitting into something other people might label or comment about, and every time his reaction didn't follow his usual instincts. There was no rejection strong enough to stick, no disgust that held, it just didn't land the way it was supposed to. Instead, what rose up first was something far more immediate and far less structured. Noah was still Noah to Tate. Tate swallowed, shifting slightly in his seat. The thought came again, more firmly this time, as if it had been waiting for him to stop resisting it. Even if Noah were gay, if that was the word people wanted to use, if that was the thing they tried to define him by, it didn't rewrite what he already knew. It didn't erase the person he'd been around, the person he understood in ways no rumor could touch. And more importantly, it didn't make him disposable. I wouldn't, Tate started, then stopped, frustrated by how clumsy the words felt. He tried again, quieter. I wouldn't treat Noe like I hurt gays. The certainty in that statement surprised him, not because it was new, but because it existed alongside opinions he had never challenged before. He had never considered himself the kind of person who would think deeply about fairness or defense or who deserved what kind of treatment. He just reacted. But when it came to the blonde rascal in his bed, the reaction was different, sharper, protective, and harder to separate from instinct. Tate's bed would be a frozen, empty place without his blonde warm toaster who kept Tate's room temperature on cold mornings very warm. In his mind, he saw it clearly, people laughing, making comments they thought were harmless and reducing Noah to something easy to talk about. The image tightened something in his chest. No one gets to do that, he muttered, almost annoyed now, like the world itself had overstepped. It didn't matter what label anyone tried to put on Noah. Tate could feel with a strange kind of certainty that he wouldn't participate in it. He wouldn't mock him, wouldn't reduce him, wouldn't let anyone else do it either if he could stop it. That part of him didn't hesitate, it didn't weigh belief against belief, it simply refused. Even the idea of Noah being treated as something less, because of who he might like, didn't sit right, no matter what other thoughts floated in the background of Tate's mind. He leaned back slightly, exhaling through his nose, frustration mixing with something quieter and harder to name. If people want to talk, he said under his breath, they can talk, but not about him like that. There was a pause, his gaze drifted unfocused again, but his thoughts didn't loosen. What confused him most wasn't Noah himself, it was the fact that Noah seemed to sit outside the categories Tate had always used without effort. It wasn't that Tate suddenly understood everything differently. It was that in Noah's case, the usual rules didn't feel relevant enough to matter. And underneath all of it, beneath the confusion, contradiction, and inherited bias he hadn't fully untangled, there was something simpler that kept pushing through anyway. Noah mattered more than the labels people tried to use. That was the part Tate couldn't argue with. Tate sat with the weight of his own thoughts pressing in on him, not loud, not dramatic, just persistent, like something he couldn't quite set down once he'd picked it up. He wasn't used to examining himself this closely. Most things in his life were taken at face value, accepted or rejected quickly without much internal debate. But Noah wasn't something his mind could process in that simple way. Noah kept turning the edges of his thinking inward, forcing him to notice contradictions he normally wouldn't look at twice. He let out a slow breath, eyes unfocused. Somewhere in the back of his mind, he admitted something he didn't say out loud to anyone else. If Noah were straight, everything would feel simpler, cleaner, easier to understand within the framework Tate had always carried without questioning it. There wouldn't be this uncomfortable pressure at the edges of his thoughts, no need to examine reactions he'd never been taught to examine. It would fit more neatly into the version of the world he was used to. But the problem wasn't simplicity. It was that Noah wasn't an idea meant to stay simple. Tate shifted slightly, jaw tightening as he stared at nothing. Because if Noah were gay, then suddenly the world stopped being something he could observe from a comfortable distance. It became something more immediate, more complicated, something that would require him to confront things he had never really unpacked in himself, beliefs he had absorbed, assumptions he had never challenged. Reactions he had never questioned because they had never been tested like this before. And he didn't like that feeling, not because he feared Noah, he didn't like the way it made him aware of himself. Still, even that discomfort didn't reach far enough to touch what mattered most. Noah remained the center of the thought, unchanged. Tate leaned forward slightly, resting his forearms on his knees. In his mind, he saw it clearly in a way that didn't rely on logic or belief systems or anything he'd inherited from other people. It was just image after image of familiarity. Noah in his space, Noah close enough that there was no distance to interpret or misunderstand, Noah existing in the same quiet orbit Tate had grown used to. Even if things were different, if Noah liked boys, if that was true, if that was the word people would use, Tate knew he wouldn't suddenly stop being there. That wasn't something he could imagine himself doing. The idea of pushing Noah away, of treating him like he had become something unworthy or unfamiliar, didn't connect to anything real inside him. It simply didn't exist as an option that made sense. Even if it made everything harder for him to understand, even if it complicated things, he preferred to keep it simple. Even if it forced him to sit with ideas he wasn't fully comfortable with, he still wouldn't step away from Noah. That part of him didn't hesitate, it didn't negotiate, it just stayed. He leaned back again, staring up at the ceiling now, as if answers might be easier to face there than inside his own head. It wasn't that Tate suddenly understood himself better. It was then that he recognized something he couldn't ignore anymore. His feelings toward Noah didn't follow the structure of his opinions about the world. They didn't obey them, they overrode them. Noah wasn't having a debate in his mind. He wasn't a category or a test case for beliefs he hadn't fully examined. He was simply the person Tate kept returning to, no matter how complicated the path became. And buried beneath everything else, the discomfort, the inherited assumptions, the uncertainty he didn't have language for, there was a steadier truth he couldn't talk himself out of. He didn't want a version of Noah that was easier to understand. He wanted Noah. Tate sat still for a long time, like moving might force the thoughts to become too real. His mind kept circling the same place again and again, not because he was trying to solve anything, but because he didn't know how to stop returning there once it had started. Noah, everything kept coming back to Noah. Tate exhaled slowly, staring down at the floor as if the answer to the discomfort sitting in his chest might be somewhere in the texture of the carpet. It wasn't, but he kept looking anyway because looking at anything else felt harder. In the simplest, most unfiltered part of his mind, there was a preference he didn't like admitting even internally. It would be easier if Noah fit neatly into what Tate already believed about the world. It would be easier if nothing about Noah forced him to rethink anything. It would be easier if there were no contradictions sitting between what he had absorbed over the years and what he felt now. Straight, the word floated through his thoughts like a placeholder for comfort, not truth. If Noah were straight, Tate could leave everything else untouched. He could keep his opinions where they were, unchanged, unchallenged, undisturbed. He swallowed, jaw tightening slightly. Noah wasn't gay, the blonde rascal wasn't a perv or a pedo. The little boy who shared his bed at night was kind and not like his own family who preyed on Tate for decades. Unless he saw physical evidence of gay behavior from Noah, he still probably would believe that Noah was confused or playing a prank. There was no way his buddy was a deviant. Tate believed that all gays were unnatural and predators. He had never seen any gay men who didn't prey on the heir to the blue fortune, which explained why Tate hated gays and violently kept them away from Noah. Tate believed in Noah's straightness so he wouldn't have to sit with the things he'd never examined about homosexuality not being the same thing as predation. He wouldn't have to sit in the space between inherited judgment and personal attachment. Because the truth underneath that preference, one he didn't fully want to articulate even to himself, was that Noah being anything else didn't just affect Noah in his mind. It reflected back onto him in ways he didn't know how to sort through. It created questions he hadn't asked about himself, why certain thoughts made him uncomfortable and what he had simply accepted without understanding. And that unsettled him more than he wanted to admit. Still, even in that discomfort, there was something he couldn't override. Noah mattered more. Tate leaned back in his chair, dragging a hand through his hair, frustration building in a quiet, contained way. As long as he says he's straight, he muttered under his breath, almost like a rule he could hold onto, something solid in the middle of everything else shifting. Then it's fine, then it doesn't have to be anything else. It wasn't logical, it was avoidance dressed up as stability. If Noah said one thing, Tate didn't question it. Not because he was blind and not because he didn't think at all, but because questioning it would mean stepping into territory he didn't feel equipped to navigate. It would mean confronting thoughts he didn't have language for yet. It would mean letting go of the idea that things could stay simple if he just kept them contained. Tate liked simple, even when it wasn't honest. His fingers curled loosely against his knee. But even that preference of keeping things simple, keeping Noah in a category that didn't force him to think too deeply, wasn't stronger than what he actually felt when he pictured Noah in his life. The closeness, the familiarity, the quiet assumption that Noah would still be there in the same way he always had been. That part of him didn't bend. No matter what labels existed or didn't exist, no matter the same in his mind in a way he couldn't easily undo, he didn't want distance from Noah. Noah's body provided a shield, a barrier from Terrence's sadist coercion and cruel abuse. Tate would protect that access and safety even if he had to believe Noah's lies about his straightness to keep Jay's protection intact for years. He didn't want reinterpretation. He didn't want a change that would separate him from the version of Noah he knew. And that was where the contradiction sat unresolved, uncomfortable but persistent. Not collapsing his world all at once but pressing against its edges and slowly making him aware that the structure he thought was stable depended on assumptions he had never been forced to test. Tate closed his eyes briefly, exhaling through his nose. "I don't care," he said quietly, not entirely sure who he was trying to convince himself, the world in his head or the part of him that kept insisting on certainty. "Just don't change." And beneath that, unspoken but unmistakable even to him, was the thing he couldn't fully untangle yet. It wasn't just about what Noah was. It was about what Tate might have to see in himself if anything about Noah stopped being simple. Tate's thoughts kept trying to organize themselves into something that felt stable, like he could line them up in a way that wouldn't shift underneath him. He didn't think of it as deception so much as structure, something fragile, yes, but still usable as long as nothing pressed too hard against it. In Tate's mind, there was a version of things that held together cleanly. Noah was straight. That single idea didn't just describe Noah. It supported everything else Tate had quietly built around him without ever naming it. It kept things simple in a way Tate didn't realize he was depending on until he imagined it not being true. The simplicity wasn't about Noah alone. It was about what Tate didn't have to think about when that assumption stayed in place. He stared down at his hands, flexing his fingers slightly as if grounding himself in something physical could steady the rest of his thoughts. "My magic trick only works if it stays consistent. If Noah is straight, it stands, and if Noah's queer," he muttered, barely audible. The if in his mind wasn't just Noah. It was the entire internal structure Tate had been leaning on without examining it too closely. The version of reality where he didn't have to question certain reactions, where he didn't have to sit too long with contradictions, where he could keep his focus on what was immediate and familiar, keep Noah close, present, and unchanged in the ways that mattered most to Tate. He didn't frame it as avoidance, not consciously. In his mind, it was just stability. A kind of mental arrangement where things didn't shift unexpectedly. But the problem with anything built on an assumption was that it only felt solid as long as nothing challenged it directly. Noah, simply by existing as a real person rather than a fixed idea, had the potential to do exactly that. Tate swallowed, his jaw tightening slightly as another thought surfaced, more uncomfortable than the rest. If anything about Noah didn't align with what he had quietly decided to believe, then the entire structure he had leaned on would feel less reliable. Not because Noah would change, but because Tate would be forced to see how much of his certainty depended on things he had never actually confirmed. That possibility unsettled him in a way he didn't want to fully name, not because it threatened Noah but because it threatened the ease of not questioning himself. He leaned back in his chair, exhaling slowly through his nose. "I don't want it to get complicated," he admitted quietly, like saying it softly made it less rigid, less exposed. "I just want it to stay the same." There was a pause after that, the kind that didn't bring clarity, only awareness. Because even as he said it, he knew reality didn't adjust itself around preference. It didn't hold still just because someone needed it to. Noah wasn't a fixed point that would remain unchanged to preserve Tate's internal balance. He was a person, separate from Tate's need for simplicity, separate from the roles Tate had placed around him without meaning to. And that separation between what Tate wanted things to be and what they actually were was exactly what he was circling without fully stepping into. He rubbed a hand across his mouth, thinking harder now, less comfortable than before. Noah would be his, regardless of what Tate needed him to be. That thought didn't collapse everything at once, but it did loosen something, not breaking it, not destroying it, just making it less rigid than before. Tate exhaled again, quieter this time. And underneath the discomfort, underneath the resistance to complication, there was still the same constant thread he couldn't fully remove from the equation. Whatever Noah was or wasn't, whatever stayed simple or became complicated, Tate's connection to him wasn't something that followed those rules cleanly. It didn't depend on stability, it just stayed there anyway. Tate wasn't next to Noah for 25 years for who the blonde was but for what Noah prevented. Tate bonded with Noah initially to have somewhere warm to sleep, and then Tate became fond of the blonde before Tate's 9th birthday. Noah wasn't something Tate could reduce to a category that stayed consistent and predictable. He was too present, too real in the way he occupied Tate's life. And that made Tate's usual shortcuts for understanding people start to fail. Tate leaned back slightly, jaw tight, staring at nothing. What he wanted, what he kept circling without saying it directly, was not complexity, not contradiction, not the feeling of having to examine every assumption he'd ever held in order to keep something important close to him. He wanted things to feel steady, understandable, familiar in a way that didn't demand constant internal negotiation. But Noah didn't exist to make that possible. And Tate couldn't deny the other part either. Whatever discomfort he had with ideas in the abstract, they didn't override what he felt when it came to Noah personally. That connection didn't behave according to his biases. It didn't adjust itself to fit them. It simply stayed there, unchanged by his attempts to simplify it. "I don't want to lose him," he admitted quietly, like the thought had been sitting there longer than he wanted to acknowledge. Not because Noah fit a certain expectation, but because Noah was the Noah Tate wanted near him. And Tate was starting to understand, uneasily, that keeping him close wouldn't depend on making Noah fit a simpler idea of the world. Tate did what he had always done. He didn't ask certain questions because it's not that Tate didn't want the truth or the answer, but his reality hinged on believing whatever made his life easier than facing his bigotry and history of childhood abuse. For Tate, believing Noah was straight was easier and less complicated. And it wasn't like Noah said he was queer. Noah had admitted at least a dozen times since they were young that the blonde was straight, so it wasn't like Tate was assuming something. If Noah ever came out as gay to Tate, he wouldn't react with violence, hate, or loathing. He would hug Noah and immediately forget what Noah had said. Noah's proximity to Tate was more important than Noah's unfortunate orientation. Tate would set a boundary that Noah was not to talk about his gayness around him or who he was dating. Tate didn't want to hear about any of that gross stuff, but he wouldn't throw Noah away or make him feel less while being around Tate. Noah had admitted he was straight and had dated girls, and Tate believed what Noah had said. If Tate ever found out that Noah had lied or intentionally misled Tate during their whole relationship, that would be the only reason Tate would become angry. By the time I was a sophomore in 1983, I had slept with most of the girls who were interested in me at school. I didn't seek them out for love. I hated love, but I sought distraction, something to pass the time when Noah wasn't around, because when the blonde was there, I didn't need anyone else. He gave me everything I wanted without words or obligations. At night in our bed, sleeping next to him, everything else, the chaos, teasing, and the gay rumors, didn't matter. But the school didn't see it that way. 3 mothers stormed into the office one afternoon when I was 15, accusing me of getting their daughters pregnant. I wasn't the father, of course, but the scandal was enough to set the entire administration into a tizzy. Whispered rumors and judgmental looks followed me down the halls for weeks. Terrence had threatened me with a gun when I was 12, warning his son what would happen if I got any of these blonde bimbos pregnant. He would shoot me in the kneecaps if I didn't wear condoms, and then my dad would force the girl to get an abortion. No way in hell my father would allow an illegitimate blue heir to live. "Mr. Tate Blue," the principal had said, pinching the bridge of his nose, "this is unacceptable behavior for a student. How could you?" "I didn't do anything," I had interrupted, calm, voice low, but with an edge that shut him up. "It's gossip, that's all it is." "No, it's bad behavior, you're leading the girls astray," one mother had exclaimed, waving a folded note in my direction. I raised an eyebrow. "I lead them where they want to go. I never promised anything else but a good time. I used condoms. It's not my fault everyone's daughter in this town performs oral on me or rolls over like a brood mare without self-respect." The girls' parents were livid when I called out their daughter for consenting to sex. I wore condoms so I couldn't be any baby's father. Noah had stayed out of it entirely. He didn't care about the girls or the chaos. His world was quiet, safe, and predictable in the way it should be. I, on the other hand, was the distraction, the chaos, the storm, and I didn't mind. I was happy to carry it all if it meant Noah could remain untouched by the nonsense of high school drama. He never had any interest in dating, not in high school or in college until much later. He focused on his studies, art, science projects, and college friends who were his own little world. I, meanwhile, had sex enough for both of us, not out of desire but out of habit, regaining autonomy, and for distraction. When he wasn't around, it was something to pass the time, something to remind myself that I was still alive, still untethered, though none of it compared to lying next to him in our room, feeling him warm, feeling the quiet of his presence fill me in ways no girl ever could. It wasn't about love, no, not for me. I didn't want love, I had him, and that was enough. We attended the freshman dance in the spring of 1982, both dressed in suits and ties. I hated suits because it felt like wearing armor, but Noah despised ties even more than me. He kept tugging at the knot around his neck, grimacing. Why do they make us do this? I asked, adjusting my own tie. I feel like I'm being strangled, he muttered, rubbing at the collar. Terrence used to strangle me with his belt before hanging my body upside down from the ceiling fan when we lived in NYC. Poor Noah didn't know what it felt like for a father to abuse and suffocate him while enduring horrifying treatment. Noah didn't understand what real strangling felt like. Yeah, well, welcome to high school dances, I said with a grin. Not exactly our style, huh? He snorted, I'd rather be anywhere else. Like our place, I asked, nudging him. He shrugged, eyes lighting up. Yeah, video game's a bad movie, you're hogging the popcorn. Hey, I protested, grinning, I call dibs on butter, you know the rules. We moved through the crowd, trying to blend in. Near the end of the dance, when the final slow song started and everyone was swaying in circles, I leaned toward him. Wanna get out of here, I whispered. Noah's eyes brightened, yes please. We slipped out of the auditorium, weaving past chaperones who were too busy talking to notice. We ended up in the girls' bathroom, thankfully empty. God, I hate dances, Noah said, loosening his tie even more. Me too, I agreed. I'd rather stay home, play video games, and watch a movie. Any night with you beats this. He leaned against the sink, frowning. I hate how everyone stares, they all whisper about us. They don't understand, I said, rolling my eyes. And honestly, I don't care if they do. Noah smiled faintly, still shy. I just wish I could be normal like everyone else. I raised an eyebrow. Normal is boring, you're brilliant and people can't handle it. That's their problem, not yours. He laughed softly. Yeah, but sometimes I just want to disappear. I put a hand on his shoulder, tilting his head so I could look at him. And you could disappear and I'd still find you, that's how it works. He blushed, looking down. You always make me feel safe, even when everyone else is stupid. Because you are, I said firmly. I'll always make sure of it. No one touches you when I'm around, no one, not in school, not anywhere. He leaned into my shoulder, quiet now, just breathing. I'm glad it's just us sometimes. Me too, I whispered, and honestly, I wouldn't trade it for anything. We stayed there for a few more minutes, talking about video games we wanted to play, movies we'd never seen, and what we'd sneak out to watch the next weekend. Do you think anyone else likes these stupid old movies? He asked. Doubt it, I said with a smirk, but that's why we like them, it's ours, nobody else gets it but us. He smiled faintly, yeah, ours. Finally, the song ended. We straightened up and walked back to the auditorium, our hands brushing briefly, our own little world still intact. Even as the lights and chatter swallowed the room, I knew it. High school could try to cage us, force us into its rules, its gossip, but as long as we had each other, we'd always have the quiet, the safety, and the closeness that no one else could touch. Later, when the crowd thinned, I grabbed Noah's hand and whispered, "Dance with me." He blinked, a little nervous. Here, now. Yeah, I said, grinning, the hallway's empty, no one will see us. We started swaying awkwardly, laughing at how silly it felt to dance outside the gym. I spun him once and we stumbled, landing next to the lockers. I pressed him gently against the cool metal, steadying him with my hands on his shoulders. Aya, are you okay? He asked, eyes wide. Yeah, I said quickly, feeling a twinge in my ankle from the stumble. My lips drifted dangerously close to his, just a centimeter, but I pulled back when he turned his head, concern in his eyes. You hurt your ankle? He asked, his voice soft. Just a little, I said, masking the ache with a grin. Nothing to worry about, you okay? I'm fine, he said, though he kept glancing at my foot. I inhaled, the warmth of him close sending a strange rush through me. Our lips barely brushed, a ghost of a touch, but I froze, remembering the last time a guy had kissed me. My face had burned, a shameful reminder I couldn't ignore. Don't worry, I said quickly, stepping back. I'm fine, it was just, I slipped a little. He studied me carefully, still pressed lightly against the locker. You scared me, I thought. That I'd hurt myself, I offered, forcing a laugh. I'll be fine, promise, nothing can hurt Tate Blue. Noah smiled faintly, relaxing. You're weird, you know that. Yeah, I said, grinning, but you like it. I like being around you, he admitted, brushing his hand against mine. Me too, I whispered, the words more honest than anything else in the world. Always. We laughed quietly, swaying again for a few moments before the hallway grew quieter. I helped him adjust his tie and gave his shoulder a gentle squeeze. "Let's get back before anyone notices we're gone," I said. "Yeah," he said, brushing off his suit jacket, "but that was fun." "Always," I murmured, walking beside him. "No one gets it, but we do." I didn't notice at first, but Noah's face was bright red. My heart skipped a beat when I realized it happened right after I brushed my lips over his in the stumble. He looked away, fumbling with his tie. It was all messed up. "Here," I said softly, stepping closer, "let me fix it for you." He hesitated, then climbed onto the edge of the sink, giving me room. My chest was brushing against him before I even realized, the air between us tight. "See, first you make the small loop," I murmured, adjusting the tie, "then the long end goes over under, like this." My fingers grazed his collar as I demonstrated, and I felt the electricity I always felt near him, the warmth, the pull. Noah looked up at me, eyes wide. I didn't know you'd get so close." I swallowed, not thinking about the effect it had on me. "It's easier if I'm close, you've got to feel it, see?" My hands lingered on the tie, brushing over his shoulders as I guided his movements. "Your hands are steady," he whispered, cheeks still red. "Of course they are," I said softly, trying not to notice the way my chest pressed lightly against him. "I always know what I'm doing with you." He laughed nervously, eyes flicking down then back up. "You're always so intense." I grinned, heart racing. "I have to be, someone's got to make sure you don't mess up, don't move, just follow my hands." He leaned a little into me and I swear the world shrank around us. I was showing him a tie, I told myself, but my fingers traced his collarbone without meaning to, and his warmth pressed against me like it always did. My mind tried to push past the heat, the tension, the pulse in my chest, and focus on teaching him. "You've got it," I said finally, stepping back and adjusting the tie one last time. "Perfect, now it won't strangle you." Noah laughed softly, tugging at it. "Thanks, Tate, you always take care of me." I smiled, brushing some hair off his forehead. "Always, you know I do." His hand lingered near mine as he climbed down from the sink. You're weird," he murmured. "I know," I said, grinning, "but you like it." He blinked at me, that shy, intense look he always gave when he couldn't figure me out. Yeah, I like it." I watched him walk back toward the hallway, my chest still tight, fingers tingling. I didn't notice how much I wanted him close, wanted him like this every day. I just knew that in these moments, teaching him, touching him in ways that should have felt mundane, it wasn't mundane at all. Not with Noah. Tate leaned against the cool, tiled wall of the school bathroom, the cold seeping through your dress shirt, making you shiver slightly. The room is bathed in the harsh, flickering light of the old fluorescent bulbs, casting long, dancing shadows on the walls. The air is thick with the scent of cheap perfume and the faint, underlying tang of bleach. The freshman dance is in full swing just outside these doors, but in here it's quiet, almost serene. You've been watching Noah from across the dance floor, his laughter echoing as he dances with a girl you don't recognize. A pang of jealousy stabs at your heart, but you push it aside, your gaze drawn to the girl who's just walked in. Jenny. She's new, a freshman like you, but she's already made an impression. Her laughter is infectious, her eyes sparkling with a confidence that's both alluring and intimidating. She catches your eye in the mirror as she approaches the sinks, her smile widening. "Hey," she says, turning to face you. Her voice is smooth, like velvet, and it sends a shiver down your spine. You return her smile, your heart pounding in your chest. "Hi," you reply, your voice barely above a whisper. She steps closer, her hand reaching up to tuck a strand of hair behind your ear. Her fingers linger, tracing the curve of your jaw, sending electricity pulsing through you. "You're new here, right?" she asks, her eyes never leaving yours. You nod, unable to find your voice. She leans in, her lips pressing against yours, soft and insistent. You kiss her back, your hands reaching up to tangle in her hair. Her lips are soft, her tongue exploring your mouth with a confidence that surprises you. The world around you fades away as you lose yourself in the kiss. Her hands roam your body, tracing the lines of your muscles, sending shivers of anticipation coursing through you. She pulls back, her breath ragged, her eyes dark with desire. She drops to her knees, her hands fumbling with your belt, her eyes never leaving yours. She stands, her lips curling into a satisfied smile. She leans in, pressing a soft kiss to your lips. "That was fun," she says, her voice low. You nod, still trying to catch your breath. She winks at you before turning and walking out of the bathroom, leaving you alone with your thoughts and the echoes of your satisfaction. You take a deep breath, your fingers tracing the metal of the ankle bracelet you still wear. Noah's gift is a reminder of a past that feels both recent and distant all at once. You push off from the wall, your body feeling lighter, your mind clearer. You're ready to face whatever comes next, ready to embrace the night, ready to live. You take one last look in the mirror, a small smile playing on your lips before turning and walking out of the bathroom, ready to rejoin the dance, ready to rejoin the world. You slip out of the bathroom, your heart still pounding in your chest, your body still tingling from Jenny's touch. The dance is in full swing, the music throbbing through the halls, the air thick with the scent of sweat and perfume. You scan the crowd, your eyes landing on Julie, another freshman you've seen around but never spoken to. She's alone, sipping a drink, her eyes scanning the crowd nervously. You see an opportunity, a chance to push your boundaries, to explore further. You approach her, a smile playing on your lips. "Hey," you say, your voice low. She looks up, her eyes meeting yours, a flush creeping up her cheeks. "Hi," she replies, her voice barely audible over the music. You take her hand, leading her away from the crowd, away from prying eyes. She follows willingly, her hand trembling slightly in yours. You lead her to the janitor's closet, the perfect place for a quick, discreet tryst. You push her against the wall, your hands roaming her body, your lips claiming hers in a rough, hungry kiss. She moans, her hands fisting in your hair, her body pressing against yours. You break the kiss, your breath ragged, your heart pounding in your chest. You both have illicit sex under the eye of every chaperone in this school. The moment doesn't seem to end until the door to the closet creaks open, revealing Mrs. Thompson, the school's strict, no-nonsense math teacher. Her eyes widen in shock, then narrow in anger. "Get out," she says, her voice like ice. "Both of you, and I'll be calling your parents." You and Julie exchange a panicked look, then rush out of the closet, leaving behind the evidence of your tryst, leaving behind the sound of your moans and groans, leaving behind the smell of sex and sweat. You know this isn't over, that there will be consequences, but for now all you can do is run. Run as fast as you can, hopping to outrun the storm that's about to hit. I sit in the back seat of the car, the silence thick and heavy, the air filled with the unspoken words hanging between my parents and me. Mom sits in the front passenger seat, her back rigid, her hands clenched in her lap. Dad drives, his knuckles white as he grips the steering wheel, his jaw clenched so tight I can see the muscle twitching. Noah sits beside me, his eyes on me, but I can't meet his gaze. Not after what happened, not after what I did. I can still taste Julie on my tongue while I shift uncomfortably, trying to hide my reaction, but it's no use. Dad turns around, his eyes narrowing as he takes in my state. "Look at you," he says, his voice like ice. "You're disgusting, a tramp, a man slut, I can't even look at you." The words cut deep, the harshness of them making me flinch. I open my mouth to respond, to defend myself, but Mom's voice cuts through the air like a whip. "Enough," she says, his voice low and dangerous. "We'll deal with this at home." The rest of the ride is silent, the only sound the hum of the engine and the occasional honk of a passing car. As soon as we're through the front door, Dad turns on me, his face red with anger. "How could you?" he screams. "Performing oral sex on a minor, in the school with a fellow student, do you have any idea what this means? Do you have any idea what you've done?" I stand there, taking the brunt of his anger, my arms wrapped around myself, trying to make myself small. Mom steps in, her voice calm but firm. "That's enough," she says, her hand on Dad's arm. "We need to talk about this calmly." She turns to me, her eyes filled with a mixture of disappointment and anger. "What happened tonight, son? The truth." I take a deep breath, my eyes on the floor. I met a girl at the dance, Julie. We went into the janitor's closet. We had sex, anal. I went down on her afterwards. That's when Mrs. Thompson found us. The words are hard to say, the shame of it all washing over me. Dad gasps, his hand covering his mouth. "Anal," he says, his voice filled with horror. "Why the hell would you be into anal? You're sick, you're disgusting." The words cut deep, the harshness of them making me flinch. Mom sighs, running a hand through his hair. "We'll have to talk to the school, figure out what the consequences are, and your father and I will be having a long talk with you about respect and responsibility." She looks at me, her eyes filled with a mixture of sadness and anger. "But for now, go to your room, we'll deal with this tomorrow." I nod, turning to leave, but Dad's voice stops me. "And don't think you're getting away with this," he says, his voice like ice. "You're grounded for life. You're not going out again, ever." I nod, feeling the weight of his words, the finality of them. I walk up the stairs, my body feeling heavy, my mind a whirlwind of thoughts and emotions. As I close my door behind me, I can hear my parents' raised voices, the sound of them arguing about what to do with me. I sit on my bed, my head in my hands, my body still tingling with the memory of the night's events. Despite the shame, despite the anger, despite the fear of what's to come, I can't deny the fact that my cock still feels good, still aches with the memory of the pleasure I felt. I reached down, my hand wrapping around my cock, feeling it twitch at my touch. I know I should feel guilty, I know I should feel ashamed, but all I can feel is the need, the desire, the hunger for more. And as I stroke myself to another orgasm, I know that this isn't over, that this is just the beginning. When I was 14, I loved taking showers. I stepped into the shower, the hot water a welcome shock against my skin. I let out a soft sigh, tilting my head back to let the steam wrap around me. I'd been looking forward to this all day, the simple pleasure of a hot shower after a long day. Noah was already in there, his back to me, his dark hair plastered to his skull. He didn't turn around, just nodded in greeting. "Hey," he said, his voice muffled by the sound of the water. "Hey," I replied, stepping under the spray next to him. We stood there in silence for a moment, the steam rising around us, the hot water pounding down on us. It felt nice, comfortable, familiar. Then suddenly Noah's body tensed. I looked down, following his gaze. He looked mortified, his face turning a shade that matched his hair. "Oh my God," Noah blurted out, his voice high with panic. "I'm so sorry, I didn't mean." I held up a hand, cutting him off. "Noah, it's okay," I said, my voice calm. "It happens, it's just hormones, right? Nothing to be embarrassed about." He looked at me, his eyes wide, his face still scarlet. You're not going to tease me about this." I laughed, a short, surprised sound. "Noah, I'm not going to tease you, we're buddies, we've known each other since we were kids, this is just biology." He bit his lip, still looking uncertain. I could see the relief in his eyes, though the tension in his shoulders eased a little. "If you want," I said, "I can step out, give you some privacy to take care of it, it's no big deal." He hesitated, then nodded, still not meeting my gaze. "Yeah, that would be good, thanks." I turned off the water and stepped out, grabbing a towel and wrapping it around my waist. I could still see the outline of Noah's erection through the frosted glass of the shower door. I felt a pang of sympathy, of understanding. I'd been there before, my body betraying me in front of someone I cared about. It was humiliating, embarrassing, but it was also normal. I waited outside the bathroom, giving Noah his privacy. When he finally emerged, his face was still flushed, but he looked calmer, relieved. I smiled at him and he smiled back a little shakily. "Thanks," he said, his voice quiet, "for being cool about that." "Anytime, Noah," I replied, clapping him on the shoulder. "That's what friends are for." And just like that, the moment passed, the awkwardness forgotten. We were just two guys sharing a house, sharing a shower, sharing a friendship that was strong enough to weather even the most unexpected of bodily reactions. I leaned back against the lockers, trying to act casual, and asked, "So, what turns you on, Noah?" His head shot up, eyes wide, and his cheeks went bright red, like fire lighting up his skin. He stuttered, fumbling over words. There's a girl in class, she's cute," he blurted out, looking anywhere but at me. I raised an eyebrow, pretending to be curious but smirking inside. "Really, just a girl?" He shifted from foot to foot, hands fidgeting with the straps of his backpack. "Why yeah, she's nice and smart, I guess," he muttered, his voice barely above a whisper. I could see the sweat forming on his forehead. "You're lying," I said, trying to sound teasing but calm. "I can tell." He froze, eyes darting to mine, panic clear. "I'm not, I don't know what you're talking about." I laughed softly, shaking my head. "Noah, come on, you're literally standing next to me and you're blushing like a tomato, just admit it." His hands went to his face, pressing against his cheeks as if he could hide his embarrassment. I don't, you're crazy." "You're thinking about me, aren't you?" I said, leaning a little closer, grinning, "and you can't say it." His whole body stiffened and he turned his head, muttering something I couldn't hear. You're impossible, Tate." I shrugged, letting the teasing linger. "Yeah, maybe I am, but you're adorable when you're flustered, admit it makes you squirm every time." He groaned, pressing a hand to his forehead. I can't, just stop." I leaned back, smiling, enjoying the flush in his cheeks and the way he couldn't meet my eyes. It was moments like this that reminded me how tightly I had him wrapped around my world, even when he couldn't say it aloud. I could see it in the way he squirmed, how his eyes kept flicking toward me without daring to meet mine. That red flush creeping up his cheeks wasn't for some girl in class, it was me. Yeah, I said, letting my voice drip with mock patience. It's a girl, totally believable. I leaned closer, watching him fidget. You know, you don't have to lie, I can tell what's really on your mind. It's normal to get a boner around other guys. Straight men have these issues too. He looked away, stammering, I'm not. Oh, come on, I interrupted, smiling. Don't make it harder than it already is. You're blushing like crazy. That's not for a girl, Noah, that's for me. His entire body stiffened and he tried to back up a step, but I just grinned and stayed close. Admit it, you can't even say it out loud, can you? Stop teasing me, he shouted, voice high and flustered, hands flailing slightly, face still burning. I laughed quietly, shaking my head. Nope, not happening, you're too easy, and honestly, I love watching you squirm like this. He groaned, burying his face in his hands. You're impossible. Exactly, I said, leaning down so my voice was just above a whisper. And you love it, even if you won't admit it. Even in his embarrassment, I could see the truth. He couldn't deny how close we were, how much he needed me around, and I never wanted to let him go. I grabbed his towel, which was hanging around his waist, as a joke. Noah wasn't wearing underwear. He turned away from me, hiding his privates from view. He turned to face me, his eyes filled with tears. This isn't a locker room, Tate, he said, his voice trembling, and this isn't a joke, you just exposed me naked without my consent. I felt sick, I'd really hurt him. I picked up the towel and wrapped it around his waist, my hands shaking. I'm so sorry, Noah, I said, my voice thick with remorse. I didn't mean to, I was just trying to be funny. Guys do it in locker rooms all the time, stupid, so stupid. He didn't say anything, just stood there, his arms still crossed, his eyes still filled with tears. I reached out tentatively and pulled him into a hug. He stiffened for a moment, then relaxed into me, his body shaking with silent sobs. I'm sorry, I whispered, my voice breaking. I was trying to tease you, I never meant to make you cry. You can take my towel anytime, Noah, I promise. I won't do anything like that again. He pulled back, wiping his eyes with the back of his hand. It's okay, he said, his voice still shaky. I wasn't expecting that, you scared me. I nodded, feeling like the worst kind of buddy. I understand, I'm so sorry. He gave me a small smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. It's okay, he said again, just, let's not joke about stuff like that, okay? Not with me, not like that. I nodded, determined to be better. Okay, I said, I promise. As I stepped into the shower, I couldn't shake the feeling of dread that settled in the pit of my stomach. I hurt Noah, my closest person I knew, and I had no idea how to fix it. The next day, Noah was waiting in the basement for me, but I was delayed by Jay upstairs in the kitchen. Tate, he said finally, his voice steady. Where have you been? I wanted to watch a movie, but you weren't in the basement. I shrugged, trying to play it cool. Around, having fun with young girls and their asses. Noah loved me. I remembered how Noah loved the color green, always had. Me, I was a blue guy, blues in every shade. Navy, sky, royal, it didn't matter what shade. I liked my colors calm, predictable. He liked his vibrant, loud, green everywhere from his shirts to his guitar strap. I liked blue because it reminded me of Jay. My godfather was like family to me, and our memories together were intertwined with the Blue family and their friends. I remembered Noah's hobbies, guitar, wrestling, and apparently me. Noah claimed he was serious about the first two, the third I knew Tate Blue was his obsession. My own list was wrestling, cooking, and movies, easy to see whose lists were more practical. We spent hours in front of the TV. I could have watched a movie 100 times and never been bored, but with Noah there, every rewatch felt new. He'd curl up between my legs on the couch, resting his head on my chest like it was the only place that made sense. Popcorn and pretzels spread across the coffee table, me tossing a piece to him now and then, laughing when he caught it midair. You're not supposed to throw those at me, he said, swatting my hand lightly. Oh, come on, I teased. I'm teaching you reflexes. You've got to be ready for anything in life. I don't need reflexes for popcorn, he muttered, smiling against my chest, hair tickling my chin. You do if I'm around, I said, pressing a little closer. I mean, look at you, you're practically a skinny green blur between my legs. Someone's got to keep you in check. He laughed softly, a little muffled. You're ridiculous, you know that. Yeah, but you love it, I said, smirking. Admit it. No, I don't, he whispered, though the warmth of his body said otherwise. I murmured, letting a hand drift over his shoulder, adjusting him comfortably against me. You're lying, I can tell. I'm not, he protested, though his laugh gave him away. I shook my head, satisfied. Of course you are, but that's okay. You always tell me the truth eventually, even if it's just with your eyes. He blinked up at me, shy and content, and I realized once again, no matter what else happened in life, these little moments, movies, snacks, being together on the couch were everything. And I'd protect him, tease him, hold him like this forever. Tomorrow my family will be coming downtown for a big birthday party. My aunt's uncle's parents all set to enjoy music, food, and whatever grown-up nonsense they like. Noah and I had other plans. It was his 17th birthday and we were staying home, just the two of us enjoying the quiet. I hated birthdays ever since my second one in 1970 when I was inducted into the Blue Family Men's Club. I was assaulted by Jay on my 15th birthday, and years later on my 25th birthday I survived the second gay hate crime after Jay hurt me. If I never celebrated a birthday the rest of my life, it would be nice. After my entire family died, I didn't fear birthdays or celebrations anymore. On Noah's 17th birthday, he was in a sleeveless tee and his expensive 501 jeans, leaning back on the couch like he always did when he thought he was safe. Me? Slacks and a Calvin Klein sweater, trying to look casual but still feeling like I owned the room when I was with him. I grinned and reached over, poking at his ribs. You know what time it is. I looked at him with an evil, goofy smile. No, he squealed, twisting away, but I grabbed his arm and pinned it gently. Tate, stop, don't tickle me. Oh, come on, I laughed, leaning closer. You love this, admit it. I do not, please stop, he begged, wriggling under my hands. His laugh was high and unrestrained, the kind of sound that made me grin even wider. I let him catch his breath for a second, just enough to tease him more. Beg all you want, Noah, you know I can overpower you if I really try. His blue eyes went wide, cheeks flushing pink, and he pressed himself back against the couch cushions. I'll stop, no more, I can't, Tate. I laughed, letting my hands hover near his sides, teasing him with the threat more than the action. See, that's what I love about you. You fight, you squirm, you laugh, and somehow it just makes me want you closer. He rolled his eyes, still laughing, but I could see it, the way his body relaxed when I leaned back next to him as he trusted me completely. He always did, and that trust, that quiet surrender, even in something as silly as tickling, was what made moments like this perfect. Noah's birthday was about him, but to me, it was just another chance to be near him, to tease him, to watch him laugh, and to remember why I could never, ever let him go. But this time, as I reached under his thigh, my hand not only accidentally brushed against something hard and warm, but I had stroked it, fondled the head, causing a large wet spot. Noah gasped, his body going rigid for a moment before he let out a low, shuddering moan and came in his pants. I froze, my hand still on him, the realization of what I'd just touched dawning on me. Noah, I stammered, my face flushing with embarrassment and something else I didn't want to name. I'm so sorry, I didn't mean. He let out a shaky breath, his voice barely above a whisper. It's okay, Tate, it was an accident. I pulled my hand away, my heart pounding in my chest. I felt like I'd crossed a line, like I'd seen something I wasn't supposed to. I started to back away, but Noah grabbed my wrist, his fingers wrapping around mine. Don't, he said, his voice stronger now. Don't make it weird, okay? It was just a reflex. I nodded, swallowing hard. Okay, I said, my voice barely audible. Okay, you came from one touch. Noah blushed, so I let go of his ribs, my hands falling to my sides. I felt awkward, unsure of what to do next. So I did what I always did when I felt like this, when I felt like I'd made things weird, when I didn't know how to fix it. I grinned, trying to lighten the mood, and gave him a playful shove. All virgins are alike, come on, I said, my voice too loud. Let's turn up the TV, make it really loud, see if we can make our mom or Uncle Joey come down here and yell at us. Noah laughed, a real laugh this time, and I felt the tension between us start to dissipate. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed, that the easy, comfortable familiarity of our friendship had been shifted, and I had no idea how to get it back. I watched as Noah stepped out of the shower, his body still glistening with water, a towel wrapped loosely around his waist. He looked up at me, a small smile playing on his lips. "Your turn," he said, stepping aside to let me in. I nodded, starting to unwrap my own towel, but then, without thinking, he reached out and tugged at the edge of mine, pulling it free from his grip. It fell to the floor, leaving me naked and exposed. For a moment, time seemed to freeze. Noah's face turned a shade of red I'd never seen before, his eyes wide with shock and embarrassment. He moved quickly, turning his back to me, my arms crossing over my chest in a futile attempt to cover myself. He was laughing, and I loved his playful side. I thought to myself I'd tickle Noah until the blonde hiccuped. That was much more fun than being with girls. I was tickling Noah, his laughter filling the room, his body squirming under my fingers. It was a game we'd played 1,000 times, a way to make him laugh until his stomach hurt, until he was begging for mercy. I knew every ticklish spot, every sensitive spot. I knew him better than anyone. I glanced at Noah, taking in his flushed cheeks, the sweat beading on his forehead, the way he was trying to subtly adjust himself in his seat. I followed his gaze down to his crotch, where the outline of his hard-on was clearly visible, pressing against the denim of his jeans. "Noah," I said, keeping my voice casual, "you okay, man? You look warm." He shifted in his seat, avoiding my gaze. "Yeah, I'm fine," he muttered, his voice tight. "You sure?" I pressed, my eyes flicking back to the bulge in his pants. "Because it looks like you're uncomfortable, like you might need to take care of something." He blushed a deep red, his eyes widening. "Tate, what the hell?" he hissed, his voice barely above a whisper. "Hey, it's cool," I said, holding up my hands in surrender. "I get it, I've been there a lot, you know, with the hormones and all." I grinned, trying to lighten the mood. "I just thought you might want some privacy too. Handle it, I can get us some drinks, give you a few minutes to, take care of business." He groaned, burying his face in his hands. "Tate, you can't just say stuff like that," he mumbled, his voice muffled. "Why not?" I asked, genuinely curious. "We're buddies, we've seen each other's, we've showered together, for God's sake, what's the big deal?" He peeked at me through his fingers, his expression a mix of embarrassment and something else I couldn't quite place. "It's just weird," he said. "You're my buddy, I don't want you to know about that stuff, I don't want you to see it." "See what?" I asked, teasing. "Your dick, dude, I've seen it 1,000 times, hell, I've seen it hard a dozen times, it's just biology, it's not a big deal." He groaned again, dropping his hands to his lap. "Tate, please," he said, his voice pleading. "Just give me a minute, okay? I'll meet you upstairs in 10, just go." I stood up, still grinning. Fine, fine," I said, heading for the door. "I'll be upstairs, don't take too long, okay?" I left him there, flustered and horny, and I couldn't help but feel a pang of guilt. I knew I was pushing his boundaries, making him uncomfortable, but I also knew, with a certainty that was almost unsettling, that I was doing it on purpose. I wanted to see him like that, wanted to know that he was affected by me. I noticed Noah moving quickly downstairs, fiddling with something in his wallet, looking unusually focused. I handed him a soda, watching the way he took it with that nervous glance he always gave me. "Hey," I whispered, leaning close enough that he could feel my breath near his ear. "Who were you thinking about?" His face went red almost immediately. He stammered, shifting on his feet. No one, I mean." I smirked, tilting my head. "Come on, Noah, you can tell me, was it that girl on TV?" He froze, blinking up at me like I'd caught him doing something forbidden. Maybe," he muttered, his words barely audible. I laughed softly, shaking my head. "Man, you are impossible, you get all flustered over nothing. Relax, I'm just curious." He shifted awkwardly, looking anywhere but at me. I could see his hands fidgeting, twisting the edge of his sleeve. I don't know why." "That's okay," I said, pressing a little closer and nudging him gently with my shoulder. "You don't have to explain everything, I just like seeing you squirm sometimes." His cheeks stayed red and he huffed a little, muttering, "You're ridiculous." "Exactly," I said, grinning, "and you love it." Even with all the awkwardness, I could tell he trusted me. Even in moments like this, embarrassing, clumsy, confusing, I knew we had our little world, and no one else would ever get it. I couldn't resist waking Noah on his special day. Not every day does my friend turn 17, and I wanted him to start it with a smile. I leaned over the bed and tickled his side lightly. Get up, sleepyhead birthday boy, I said, grinning. He squealed, squirming under my fingers. Tate, stop, I'm still tired. No way, you're 17 today, you can sleep later, I laughed, finally letting him catch his breath. I handed him a green bike I'd picked out. Here, now you can ride over to my house every day without whining about walking. His eyes went wide. Seriously, you didn't have to. I shrugged, smirking. Of course I did, it's your birthday, plus someone has to make sure you don't get lost on the way here. He grinned, but before he could respond I tossed him a second gift. His mom had forgotten again, typical for his mother, and I'd made sure to fix that. He giggled and tore the wrapping off. I couldn't wait to see my buddy's face because it was something he didn't know he needed. His face lit up and I knew my gift choice had scored with him. The box hit him squarely in the chest. He caught it, eyes widening when he saw the autograph inside, Corey Haim. No way, he screamed, throwing his arms around me, almost knocking me over. You got this, for me. Yeah, I said, laughing as I steadied him. You've liked him for years. I was at the premiere last month and he signed it for me, thought you might like it. He kissed the side of my neck quickly, just a little gesture, and stepped back, still grinning like a kid on Christmas morning. I love it, thank you, Tate. You better, I teased, nudging him gently. It's your birthday, so you're required to be happy, no excuses. I'm happy, he said softly, still holding the gift. This is the best birthday ever. I just smiled, watching him carefully, feeling that familiar warmth. He didn't need to say it, but I knew. Every little gesture, every laugh, every wide-eyed grin, it all told me how much our bond mattered, and for today at least it was perfect. We never fight, which is so unusual, but somehow it works for us. Most of the time I was the one in the wrong, and Noah, well, he was too innocent even at 17 to ever be at fault for anything. I'm sorry, I said more times than I could count, sometimes for hurting his feelings, sometimes for inconveniencing him even when it was something small. I couldn't risk him leaving me at any time, so I apologized regardless of who was at fault. I didn't mean to upset you, I'd add, watching his eyes soften as he shrugged it off. No, really, he'd say, a small, genuine smile lifting the corners of his mouth. It's okay, you don't have to apologize. But I always did. It felt natural, like breathing. I couldn't stand the thought of him feeling hurt because of me, and every time he forgave me I realized how rare it was to be this close to someone, to have a friendship so delicate and yet so resilient. Sometimes I'd catch myself thinking I shouldn't have done that, and immediately, I'm sorry, Noah, would spill out before I even had a chance to pause, and he, as always, would just shake his head, so patient it was almost painful. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't meant to be, but it was ours, and for us that was enough. I noticed that Noah would get quiet sometimes, and it always scared me. The way he'd stare at nothing, or the way his shoulders would slump just a little, it made my chest tight. I needed him happy if he was going to stay where I needed him. Since the week after my 15th birthday, when I survived Jay's attack in the shower, I tripled my PDA and physical touches to make Noah understand that removing his body from me wasn't okay. I hated that part of me, the part that knew I was kind of using him and love bombing Noah every night. The nights he stayed close, letting me lean on him, trusting me, and I wasn't entirely honest with him. I made him think I loved him, and it was wrong. Every time he looked at me with that small, trusting smile, I felt a pang of guilt that I couldn't shake. You okay? He asked one night, his voice soft in the dark. Yeah, I muttered, though I knew I wasn't, just thinking. He didn't push, didn't ask more, he never did, and I hated that my relief at his silence made me feel even worse. I was taking comfort in him, in his presence, while twisting it in my head to make it feel like love. I have to make this right somehow, I thought as I traced the edge of his hand without looking. I have to show him that he's more than just this, that he deserves more than me needing him to fill my nights or warm my body. But for now, all I could do was stay quiet, pretend I was okay, and hope he didn't notice how tangled up I was inside. I watched Noah curl up beside me, his body small and warm against mine. He was quiet tonight like he sometimes got, and my chest twisted with a familiar, suffocating guilt. I knew what I was doing. I knew that every laugh I coaxed from him, every sigh he gave me when he fell asleep in my arms, every time he pressed his face to my chest, it wasn't innocent. Not entirely, not for me. He trusted me, he loved me, and I was taking advantage of him and his feelings. God, I'm awful, I thought, staring at the ceiling as if the walls could answer me back. I'm using him, every night, and he doesn't even know. I'm tired, he murmured softly, his eyelids drooping but even in his sleepiness. There was that small smile he gave me, the one that made me feel like I could almost believe I was worthy of him. Yeah, me too, I said quietly, my hand brushing over his hair. I wanted to tell him. I wanted to confess that I was lying every time I made him think I loved him back, that I needed him, that I wasn't just using him to fill the hole I couldn't face alone. But I couldn't ruin that, not for him. He's too sweet, too innocent, too oblivious, and God, I'm cruel for this, I'm cruel and selfish, and my stomach knotted, my throat burned. Why can't I just let him see the truth? Why can't I just let him be happy without me twisting it into this? I shifted closer, letting him nestle against me. The warmth was comforting, and yet every heartbeat echoed with shame. I was exploiting his trust, his love, his loyalty, and I would never tell him, never. Do you like it when I'm here? He asked softly, voice almost asleep, trusting me to answer honestly. I froze. Honest, that word stabbed me. I wanted to scream, wanted to rip my own chest open and spill the truth, but instead, I nodded and smiled. Yeah, I do.